From an outsider's or newcomer's point of view, Tucker House may be just another old house, quaint perhaps, but not very distinctive. From the point of view of those whose families have been here since the 1850s and 60s, it has become a place to meet and share family stories, and if truth be told, over the course of the last 150 years, those who gather here have ancestors in common. Tucker House is a place for the old-timers to come together, but it also has become a place for newcomers and old-timers to meet, a real community center. There are stories to tell about the settling of this part of Parker County that even those who have lived here all their lives have never heard. This fall tour of the northeast quadrant of Parker County is about telling some of those stories by visiting the sites where the action has been. Hopefully, this tour will spark an interest in having future events. In 2019, Tucker House published Laurie Smith's Around Veal Station. Subsequent to publication, Kimberly, Woody, Boretsky, and Miss Smith planned a tour of 5 properties around Veal Station: Tucker House, William and Elizabeth Woody Homestead, Veal Station Cemetery, Josie and Clodagh Woody 1932 Dairy Barn, and Francis Dobbs, also known as Dobbs-Woody-Engberg log cabins. COVID intervened, and the tour was postponed until the fall of 2022. The first 3 named properties are among Parker County's 126 properties with historical markers issued by the Texas Historical Commission. The Woody Dairy Barn and the Dobbs-Woody-Engberg cabins, though not having a marker, are of historic interest. This tour provides a rare opportunity for visitors to see the properties up close, with a docent on site to point out features unique to each of the properties. For the history buff, there are a number of other sites bearing an historical marker in the northeast quadrant of Parker County that can be viewed from the road, not included in this tour. Among them are Slover School, Clark Cemetery, Woody Cemetery, Godfrey's Chapel, and the Texas Centennial marker at Veal Station. In 2022, the Texas Historical Commission issued a marker in the name of Martha Elizabeth Cockburn Tucker as the quintessential pioneer woman. This marker should be in place by midsummer 2023. Much has gone into working out the details for this tour. A special thanks go to those who've opened their property to visitors: Cassie Clues, Elizabeth Mark Salvatore, Sheila and Melvin Woody, Silver Creek Heritage Society, and the Veal Station Cemetery Association. Credit for organizing the event Kimberly Woody Boretsky, and Laurie Chance Smith. Docents for the tour include the property owners themselves, Ann Tucker Moody, Norleen Wright Carter, Tim Wright, and Laurie Chance Smith at Tucker House, Melvin Woody and Kimberly Boretsky at the Woody Dairy, Craig Boretsky and Harold Lawrence at the Log Cabins, and Bill Warren, member of the Parker County Abandoned Cemetery Association and Parker County Historical Commission at Veal Station Cemetery. Tony King, recorder and videographer of the event, and George Conley, Commissioner Precinct 1, Parker County, helps out wherever he can. In January of 2012, Tucker House was awarded an historical marker by the Texas Historical Commission in recognition of the contribution Moses and Martha Cockburn Tucker and their descendants have made over a period of 150 years to Parker County. In 1936, the year of the Texas Centennial, a photograph of the log cabin Moses and his brother Aaron built was featured in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. The same photograph was issued in G.A. Holland's History of Parker County and the Double Log Cabin, published by Weatherford Herald in 1937. More than anything else, that photograph was to galvanize the Tucker family and to establish their place in the early history of Parker County. Indeed, that photograph has become something of an iconic image of Parker County pioneers. In 1945, the Tucker cabin was consumed by fire. In 1999, Ann Tucker Moody donated the home of her grandparents, B.J. and Emma Tucker, to the Silver Creek Heritage Society for its meeting place. Since that time, Tucker House has hosted biannual gatherings, at first for the descendants of the early pioneers, and later to include the new families that have settled in the area. Tucker House has truly become a community center in the best sense of the term. Tucker House was built in 1889 by brothers V.J. and J.J. Tucker, sons of Moses and Martha. The brothers farmed the land jointly up until V.J.'s marriage to Emma in 1896. V.J. was a cotton farmer who only later turned to dairy farming after losing his crops to a hailstorm in the 1920s. Here they raised their 5 children, Faye, Mose, Lorene, Guy, and Lois. Emma died in 1930. V.J. continued to dairy until his death in 1946. Guy had gone off to Detroit to make his fortune, but returned upon his mother's death, and with money he had saved, purchased a milk hauling route supplying Boswell Dairy in Fort Worth. For the next 40 years, that grew from 10-gallon bucket cans stacked in an insulated box to large container tanker trucks. He purchased the family farm from the estate in 1946 and continued the dairy, at first with help and later from leasing out the farm. The Cleo Wright, Clark Critchell, Denzel Wright, Virgil Wright, and Harold Wright families are among those who lived and dairied on this farm over the years. Architecturally, Tucker House is a great example of vernacular, that is, folk architecture. It is unique in its construction. The house is set back from the road with a dip in the land between the house and the road, which makes it appear more imposing than would otherwise be the case. The finished house consists of 2 rooms with a central hall at the front, with a kitchen, bath, sunroom, and another sunroom to the back. A steep stairway in the room to the right, as one enters, leads to a loft with 2 rooms, one finished, the other not. The 2 rooms in Central Hall are reminiscent of the floor plan of a dog trot log cabin, probably where they got the idea, though the cabin they grew up in, Moses Tucker's cabin, was but a single room. It all seemed so well planned out, but it wasn't. It was a house that grew. The most obvious oddity in the house construction is the second door facing onto the lean-to porch, which is a separate entrance to the room at the right. Another oddity is that the back of the fireplace on the east wall of the same room projects into the hallway. The place for a fireplace is on an outside wall. Lastly, there is a very narrow staircase in the corner of this room, a feature often found in earlier pioneer cabins. The only possible conclusion that can be drawn from these details is that this one room constituted the whole of VJ and JJ's cabin, and that the hallway and room to the east were added later. As for the rooms at the back, family tradition has it that the kitchen was added sometime after VJ and Emma married. Emma, it seems, insisted upon having the kitchen as part of the house and not a building out back. Another curious element is that each of the major rooms measures roughly 16 feet by 16 feet with an 8-foot ceiling, an approximate size of a single-room log cabin. All these details also point to the influence log cabins had on the next generation's architecture. In another way, the construction of Tucker House is not what one would expect. It is neither frame nor log. Rather, the walls of the house are simply 1x12 boards vertically attached to floor and ceiling joists. Beaded boards nailed horizontally on the interior, and exterior siding nails similar to strengthen the 1x12s to support the roof. Most houses constructed this way had a full hip roof, that is, in the shape of a pyramid. In order to accommodate the two loft rooms, that feature is modified. Some confusion may stem from the exterior siding used on the house, since the siding on the west and the east are the same, a type of siding popular from the 1880s to 1900. The siding across the front of the house, however, dates from about 1900. At this point in time, there is no way to explain the juxtaposition of these two sidings. A visit to Tucker House should include a look at the dairy barn, the poultry shed, and the Wright Tucker Chapel. The dairy barn is typical of the barns of the 1940s, after electricity made milking machines a labor-saving device. The poultry shed shows what it takes to keep chickens safe from critters, and the miniature chapel was the culmination of a lifelong dream of Norman Wright to build a miniature church. Appropriately, this chapel stands as a symbol of the faith that brings the community together.
Yes, ma'am. You're on video. You're on these newfangled moving pictures.
Well, hi everybody. All right. Yeah. So you want to come see the rest of the history of the house?
Yeah, if you don't mind, or anything you want to tell us about the house. I've got a.
Hello, Tony.
Hi there. How are you, Miss Laurie?
I'm good.
Let me get you on camera here.
Welcome.
Thank you.
When this house was first built, it was only. That was the back door that you just stepped through.
Right here.
And the kitchen was added later. In fact, when I was a small girl, you could see.
Oh, a gap?
You could see the gap.
Do you know what year the kitchen was added? Have any idea?
I was born in 1938, and it was here when I was a wee small girl.
Right.
So probably I would say in the 1930s or late 20s,
Wow.
it was added. And there was a lady named Mrs. Dixon who owned it down by the creek. She got behind on her taxes, like very far behind. And my grandfather Tucker was a member of the, anyway, there was some kind of disagreement and the house came here. And it became my grandmother's kitchen. I believe that this fireplace used to have an opening on this side and the other side.
Oh, really?
I think when I was about 3 years old, I sat in Granddad Tucker's lap in a rocking chair in front of this fireplace. I think it was here and not in the other room. And I could be wrong about that, but I think I'm right. And so the house was built in 1889. You know that, I'm sure. And my grandfather Tucker and his older brother Jerry built the house. There are logs underneath that serve as the, what do you call those?
Pier and beam
Pier and
or
beam.
foundation?
Well, it's tree logs. And yeah, I spent a lot of time here as a little girl. My brother, Joe Tucker, who is now deceased, was born in this house in 1935. And then my dad and mother built their house, which is the rock house a mile away. And I was born in the hospital at Weatherford and spent my whole life until college in that rock house. And then my great-grandfather, Moses Tucker, came, they lived in Kentucky on his father's 2,000-acre farm. And he and his twin brother, Aaron, all biblical names, were in charge of the corn crop. The corn crop.
Oh, the corn crop.
Back in Kentucky.
Oh, okay, right.
And they didn't like the way their father divided up the money. So they got on their horses and came here. And they just laid claim to hundreds, maybe thousands of acres.
Wow.
This was before the Homestead Act. This was in 1853, so you could still claim what you wanted. So for many years, only descendants of the Tucker family lived in this,
thousands of acres around.
Yeah,
Just
really.
Tuckers.
Yeah, but now, of course, a lot of people have sold, and there are all kinds of non-Tuckers living here now, which is a good thing. Anyway, Moses built a log cabin over in the farm, which is now Norling Carter's place. And I remember being on the school bus one morning when I was in about 3rd grade. We rounded the corner, which used to be there, is not anymore. Rounded the corner, and you could see the ashes coming up from where the cabin had burned. But I have pictures of the cabin with my grandfather Tucker. There are probably some here somewhere. Of the cabin with the the young man there. Yeah. It's a very interesting history to me.
That's great.
And
I need to talk to you about photographs.
About what?
Photographs, if you got any. There's in that Weatherford, that book on Parker County. That big...
In 2012, Elizabeth and Mark Salvatore bought the house on Old Springtown Road, locally referred to as the Woody House. The Salvatores had come to Texas from Connecticut, where they were accustomed to living in an old house. Elizabeth grew up in a house built in the 17th century. The Woody house, which was reputed to be the oldest frame house in Parker County, fit the bill of what they were looking for. They soon busied themselves restoring the house and highlighting the elements of the house that dated back to the days of William and Elizabeth Woody, the pioneer couple that built the house along the lines of a dog trot log cabin. That is, 2 rooms with a breezeway between, but in this case a hallway. Working with Kimberly Woody Boretsky, a 7th generation Woody in Parker County and a direct descendant of William and Elizabeth Woody, the Salvatores applied for and received an historical marker from the Texas Historical Commission in 2018. Since that time, the Salvatores have generously opened their home and shared its history with visitors. Although the text on the marker is essentially correct, there are a couple of factual errors in the text. The Woodys did not build a 2-room, story-and-a-half dog trot home, and the 2-story frame meeting house was actually located in Veal Station, where the Texas Centennial marker is located. William Woody, December 15, 1824 to September 11, 1915, purchased James Tucker's preemption certificate on January the 15th, 1854, but was not granted legal patent to the 320 acres until 1857. James Tucker arrived in Parker County a few years prior to Moses Tucker, who arrived in 1855. They were no relation. The fact that he still resided on this property for virtually the rest of his life, William Woody has been credited as being the first permanent settler in the county. He came to this county about the year 1854, when the county was a semi-wilderness. Elsewhere, however, Samuel Woody, William's father, also holds the distinction of the first permanent resident. William's coming to the county preceded his father's, which clarifies the historical note in terms of family history. There are, however, families in the county who would challenge first permanent settler claims. For the sake of argument, until otherwise proved, let it stand that members of the Woody family have claims of being the first permanent settlers in Parker County. In an essay included in The Tale of Two Schools, Springtown, Parker County, William's grandson, Charles Lorenzo, reflects, Bill built him a house across Walnut Creek, which at that time was a mansion. He also hauled the lumber with ox teams 200 miles and planed every board by hand, and the house now stands in a cluster of live oak trees. These 4 rooms sealed inside with a ceiling lumber planed and grooved by hand by Bill and his son, with a sun porch on the south and a large feather bed within, made it inviting to sojourners who could form the acquaintance of Bill. Here the history seems a bit off. A drawing of the Woody house clearly shows that the original house consisted of a 2-room dog trot cabin floor plan. Also, the milling of the ceiling lumber is a bit romanticized at best. Across Old Springtown Road once stood what was referred to as the William Woody Barn. The double crib barn was virtually destroyed by a tornado in 2015. Half of that barn was of hand-hewn log construction, which argues that the structure was almost certainly built for human occupancy, not as a barn. Buried in a brief biographical sketch of George Preston Woody, William's son, there is a mention that George was able to view through the slits in the walls of the cabin savages driving off livestock. This suggests an early William Woody log cabin, since there were no slits in the Woody house. Most likely the structure was the first home of William and Elizabeth Woody, built before the arduous trip by ox cart to Shreveport for the lumber used in the construction of the frame house. With this caveat in mind, Lorenzo's account states the building of the barn is of interest. After noting that he relied on local materials, he goes on to write, They called him Old Bill because he was a physical giant and was known far and near for his strength and character. The huge oak logs with which he built his barn are still intact, and the tradition is that he built his barn alone, and his only boss was his wife. This house, which stands on its original hand-hewn log foundation, has been continuously lived in for over 165 years. There likely is no other house in Parker County for which this claim can be made. William Woody was not a man of great wealth, nor is he known for having held high office in the county. His obituary simply pays tribute to a decent man. Up to a few years ago, he visited Weatherford frequently and was often seen on the streets. Of a happy disposition, full of human nature, Uncle Billy counted his friends in the hundreds. Big in body, big in heart, big in soul, he at all times stood for that which is highest and best in life. He came to the county before the town of Weatherford was founded and saw this county a wilderness. He saw the days of the bad man of Indians times in western outlawry. Yet through it all he stood like a stone wall. His name does not appear on the court records, and in a long acquaintance extending over a period of nearly 40 years, the writer never heard man, woman, or child say aught against his name. One last tribute to the man is worth noting. Charles Lorenzo Woody said that while his father could neither read or write, he certainly believed in education. It is strange indeed that these rugged men were the men who caused millions of acres of wild lands of Texas to be set aside and dedicated to the support of the common schools and of the various higher institutions of learning in Texas.
I seen you again.
And they just sent me 35 things that the pioneers did to ward off evil, and especially if they had to do with the dead. Oh. And I think this was one of them. But I read all 35 of them yesterday, and I thought, well, now, I never heard some of these ever. But the whole thing about throwing salt over your shoulder is one of them.
Yep.
I still do that.
I still do.
My grandmother had one of these, and she kept flour in it. And when she wanted to make my granddad, for breakfast, she poured a little milk in there, and she opened it up to make tuna. Oh, goodness gracious.
You're all going to be famous.
There you go, Nina.
I had no problem with that. He said this used to be the back of the house right here. See the old siding?
Yeah.
Shiplap, I'm sure it was shiplap.
There it is.
Oh, really?
Really? When was
That one's
built?
1854.
50.
Cool, how cool is that?
Yeah, no, this was, he was the first one here.
Yeah, and that was just kind of an open fall, and I wanted something a little bit got a regular register. But, you know, and like that door is probably not original.
Right.
The doors that we have that are original are 4 panels, but I love the joinery on that door so much that I stripped it down, and it's just beautiful how they put it together.
Well, South was really well.
Yeah, and,
Much more.
Oh, yeah.
and I had.
I think our oldest door is this one over here in the front hall, and although this is original too.
And you know, they always say that they were going to Texas because they got thrown out of where they were.
Yeah, probably.
The story I heard is they had a bad drought, crop failure in Tennessee and Alabama, and the folks would leave and they would scratch GTT on the cabin door that they abandoned, which stood for Gone to Texas.
Oh, really?
Well,
Wow.
in my genealogy, I read
We find those everywhere.
that when
All over
somebody
the
left a
property all
note
the
that
time.
said,
I
your
had
son,
hardware.
GTT,
Yeah, it was
it meant
not
they were in trouble with the law.
So we-
Oh, really?
And they were escaping.
Oh,
Because
I
it
see.
was still a republic.
And I got
Well, that's a
these
perfect
from-
place to come because there was no law here.
Right,
Zero.
right.
Right, teen, something like that.
I think they had hangings in Jacksboro and up around Montana County and.
This is where they hung the Hill family here.
The whole family?
No, well, they hung the father and son and shot the mother and 2 daughters.
Oh. Was it?
They were
It wasn't Indians, they would have scalped them.
No, they were bad people, the Hills.
And then
They
this
harbored a
is
lot
the
of
certificate from the museum in Northampton.
Bad
thieves
I was
okay.
explaining that.
and
they put
horse
the shoes in the
thieves and all
walls
that. They were
to
nothing
protect the
but
house.
trouble.
Um,
And
That was the way to
and
start
they
it.
usually
Well,
show this
yeah, hang on.
person, although
I mean,
I would
when
bet
you
that
go to
It
do-
stopped it.
yeah, take them to Weatherford or take them down to Fort Worth and
Yeah.
say, hey, can you try these people? Why would they
And
waste
we
their
found
time?
them when we
Yeah.
stored
They
them
didn't
on
have
the
time
porch.
like that.
And
So they just
the electrician
hung them or
went to
shot
the
them.
light, he found one up in the attic over the light.
The 2 children,
So
the
really right
local
where you are on the
pastor
door.
took
And
it.
then the one we found in the wall was buried.
Yeah, usually when there was orphan kids, somebody took them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's,
figured.
I found that in my genealogy. So well maintained and added on to, beautiful.
But
So yeah, I love
they
this
let
house.
so many travelers.
I just can't believe I used to drive to work back and forth and never saw the front
No
of
one
it.
knows this place is here. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
I've driven past it, would have no idea this
Yeah.
house was that old.
Harold, didn't know this was here.
Oh,
Right.
when I turned and came around the corner, I said, oh, I love that porch.
Yeah, this is just some of the
Take
stuff
care.
that they
Okay, y'all too.
and he has spent hours going over the place and finding stuff.
Yeah, one of my grandsons wants to do that, wants to do something technical. I told him, I said, yeah. I said, you can find a lot of treasures when you do
Yeah. Well, Don is actually trying to recreate the trail that the cavalry used to leave Fort Worth to go to the fort in Graham and then further west. So
Huh.
this is just his fun stuff. Yeah, that's his serious work. Well, and so the shoes, I'm actually going to build a shadow box in the wall upstairs and try to get them as close
And
to
then there's
right over the
upstairs,
front
too.
door as I can. The other side was pancake timber. And we took them down and have them at a time. And we want to dry stuff.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, thank you.
The Saga of the Apostrophe. There is a cemetery in northeast quadrant of Barker County embroiled in a controversy involving an apostrophe. It is also one of the oldest cemeteries in the county. You'd think if there were to be a controversy that it could have been settled some time past. Not so. The question is, should an historical marker issued by the Texas Historical Commission read Veal Station Cemetery or Veal Station Cemetery? Well, the marker reads Veal Station Cemetery, but because of that little apostrophe, the marker stands next to the marker by the Woody Homestead rather than at the cemetery. A sign in bold, all capital letters arches over the entrance to the cemetery. The inscription reads, Veal Station, one word, that's all there is. The cemetery is under the ownership and care of the Veal Station Cemetery Association. The title to the property is in the name of the Veal Station Cemetery Association. However, when those responsible for securing the Texas Historical Commission recognition of the cemetery as an historic cemetery, the identifying information was for Veal's Cemetery, also known as Veal Station Cemetery. When the representative of the association signed the permission for marker placement, she acknowledged the name of the cemetery at Veal Cemetery. That quite simply should be all that needs to be said on the subject. However, the fussing over the name of the cemetery did not stop there. Two questions need to be answered: which is more historically accurate and which form is grammatically correct. The answer to both questions: either form is correctly verifiable, and both forms conform to standard English usage. Historically, the two earliest references to the area are to Veal Station, with no apostrophe. Similarly, reference is found in Nixon's history in an article by Charles Woody, and again in reference to Samuel Houston Woody, but in particular, the list of burials in the cemetery dated 1999 uses the title Veal Station Cemetery, no apostrophe. In lists of their church membership, Cumberland Presbyterian Church of Veal Station with an apostrophe S, and the Baptist Church of Veal Station with no apostrophe, chose their own format. Most memorable, however, Veal Station is the preferred form in Holland's history of Parker County. The second reference is the wording of the 1936 Texas Centennial Marker.
Okay, well, these are the handouts for the these are the handouts for for this. Oh, they give it away. Oh well.
Blot that out.
Blot all those out.
Let's see.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sure there's a cemetery out there, but I can't find any record of where they are. Hello, how are y'all doing today? This your first stop, or?
Well, we were at the Tucker House.
Oh, you went to the Tucker House. So I guess you've got all of the brochures and the things that they have right there. We're with the Abandoned Cemetery Association. Laurie asked us to docent out here today.
Oh, okay.
So I've got a little map of the of the cemetery, thank you, where some of the families are buried. And I noticed she gave it away on here where Mr. and Miss Tucker are buried, so you ought to be able to find that one fairly easily.
Laurie is our daughter.
Oh, so you probably already, oh well, that's a dead giveaway.
This is kind of home.
And I know where Miss Tucker's buried.
Okay. What about the firstborn?
The oldest firstborn in the cemetery.
We have two people that were born in the 1790s buried here. Yeah. So, in fact, he just remembered them and looked them up, and sure enough, they're buried here. So, if you want to do a little treasure hunt,
there's no prize though. Sorry.
We'll save that for later.
Well, at least it's a nice breezy day.
1790.
One of them was 1791, and the other was 1793. Was when she was born.
Give him a hint. Tell him the last name. Swallow.
Swallow. Swallow. The swallows,
like
yes.
bird.
Like a bird, right.
And remember, the birds fly south.
That's
That's the other hint.
That's the other hint, right? Really, yeah. Well, I sure have enjoyed working with Laurie over the years on a lot of different projects. So,
Yeah.
and I hear she's written me about a new one she's working on for Dicey. So, good luck for her on. I know she'll get it done and do an excellent
She'll
job.
get it done.
Do an excellent job of it too.
Thank you.
All right, sure. Y'all have a good day.
Sheila and Melvin Woody Ranch faces Old Springtown Road southwest of Veal Station. The gently rolling grassland appears featureless except for spotted clusters of native trees and dry creek beds. As one approaches the main gate, it is hard to miss the collection of rusty old farm machinery: scissor mowers, hay rakes, baler, disc, and plow. Melvin has assembled along the pipe fence. Most of the wagon wheels in the fence are from off the ranch. Hanging on the gate post in the Woody Ranch sign with the brand SMW, the initials of Sheila and Melvin Woody. On the gate itself are ornamented silhouettes of a roundup, a watering trough, and a windmill. Up the drive stand an old rusty gas pump and a still usable grindstone. Beyond that, a collection of buildings. The farmhouse was built about 1930 by Melvin's grandparents, Joseph and Clodagh May Woody, as their summer house. The 1932 Woody Dairy Barn sits back off the road, hidden from view. In 1923, Joseph and Clodagh May's brother, Jefferson Davis Cooch, Jr., had founded the highly profitable Woody Cooch Livestock Commission Company in Fort Worth. Both men began investing in farmlands in the Veal Station community. Joseph ultimately acquired over 4,000 acres, which he stocked annually with 200 to 300 head of feeder calves, and in 1932 ventured into the dairy business with the construction of his red terracotta Acme brick partition tile style dairy barn with more than 24 milking stations. This was a fully commercial dairy operation. Joseph was a no hands-on dairyman. He hired a manager to oversee the day-to-day operation of the dairy. He provided housing for both the manager and the milkers. Milking machines were not introduced until rural electrification came to the county in 1939. Other than that, this was a first-class dairy with a cement center walk which allowed for washdowns. Runoff from these washdowns, however, went into dry creek beds. With electrification, in addition to milking machines, came a quick chill room where the filled 10-gallon milk cans were kept awaiting pickup for delivery to Boswell's Dairy in Fort Worth. Joseph died in 1950, but the dairy continued to operate until 1967. In terms of Texas ranches, Melvin and Sheila Woody's 1,000-plus acre ranch is a relatively small operation. With assistance from his older daughter, Kimberly, Melvin is able to manage both his herd of 65 head of Charolais and Charolais Angus and a comparable operation for his sister Joanne. The Woody Ranch offers a rare opportunity to visit the Grand Prairie of Texas in its pristine state. Melvin maintains 5 miles of ranch roads. He has maintained native pasturing, except for a couple of small areas no plow has broken the soil. Both his and his sister lands are fenced and cross-fenced, allowing for proper pasture management. Melvin, now in his mid-80s, has no notion of retiring.
There's Melvin. How are you, sir? Tony King. You met me once. It's been a while ago.
I know it, yeah.
How you been?
2 or 3 years. Most of the time pretty good.
Most of the time pretty good. I like that. Well, good. Nice barn you got here.
Oh, listen, it's an old barn, but it's a strong barn. They built it good, and we put new metal on top, and it doesn't get wet.
Right.
So it works.
What year was it built? The first portion of the barn?
We think That it was built in, maybe 35 or something.
Well, and can you still get these bricks, these big square bricks? Just, so those, they don't make those no more.
No, if you break your brick, you've got to put little bricks in and
okay.
fill in the hole.
Wow.
This barn will hold 28 cows. There's 14 cows on each side.
Okay, 28.
And the little feeder thing there, they would go into this room here, and we have mixed feed in here, and they would fill up the little cart, bring it back out here, empty it up, go back in there, fill it up again. And that was somebody's job while they were down the hole. And
Feed it in.
they would do corn and whatever other stuff that needed to be milled. And then they'd mix it. This was their mixing room also. And as I said, then they'd pull it out there. All of that stuff we haven't bought. So it's just been part of the dairy barn the whole time.
Wow.
And in here, we've always had hay. And
The hay barn.
that's the hay.
I was gonna say, it's a nice door right there, just to throw it in.
That's right. That's what we did. And a lot of hay. It'll hold a lot of hay. We didn't have enough hay to last all winter from just this one room right here.
I would believe that.
Also, this tile is different, which my daughter told you already about it. It's a different type tile. It's not the big square tile, but it's more like a brick.
Yes.
And so it changed over time.
No, but it's beautiful. It stayed up this long.
Yeah, right.
It's just amazing.
Let's see. Probably 20 years ago, this roof blew completely away.
Really?
And blew on the other side of this barn and blew up into a tree and knocked down our electricity pole.
Oh my
But
God.
I mean, it just took it all.
Yeah.
So it's they've stuck it on better now with, I think they've stuck some bolts through to maybe hold it on better. So maybe it won't blow off again.
Not this time, right?
Yeah, it just blew it. Wasn't a tornado. We've had tornadoes before, but it was just a straight one. This barn is protected by those roofs, and so it really don't get real cold down here. It still freezes, but not real cold.
I was gonna say, not bad at all.
Yeah. All right, come on back this way. Those cows, when they would get ready to milk them and put them in here, this was a vacuum system, and so they used, after they got electricity in the 40s, they put the vacuum system in. It went all the way around. Every cow had an outlet, and they would use that system to milk all the cows. And they had a milker that would hang on the cow, and when they'd get through, they'd take it off and then empty it out. And then down here is the little tank that ran this, and then here was the motor that created the vacuum, just like they do today.
Oh,
Yeah. And they would put milk in them when it was hot. It was in ice water. They would bring ice out from Fort Worth. So anyhow, they filled it full of ice, and they kept them ice down all the time until the truck came to pick them up. Then in 40, we got electricity, and there's still some, well, there's not much left now, but anyhow, the electricity was all hung on the outside of this wall. And right here, through this door, they would put milk that came from out there, and they had some kind of it wasn't a freezer, but it was something that would cool the milk off from the tap that was poured in here until it got down here. It was cool, and what cool meant, I don't know, but anyhow, it was cold. And then when they got through here, then they would take it into here, and I'll show you the vault that they would put it in. But anyhow, this in here is where they used to clean the vessels, and then they'd hang them up on these pipes to let them dry.
So cool.
It is. It was a nice thing. It was used a lot.
The outside. That's that old square tile that I think Melvin's is indicating you can't get anymore. And this is the master bathroom, right?
Yes, sir. This is probably one of the few left. This was built by the CCC probably around 1934. And this is where they put the young men to work to get them off the food line and stuff.
Oh, wow.
And before the World War II.
Setting back off the road on the old Springtown Road is a fairly large structure clad in corrugated iron sheeting that from all appearances is just an old barn, but it is more than that. It is that building that brings us here. That sheeting both hides and protects two log cabins, one dating from the 1850s, the other from about 1900. These two cabins are the principal points of interest at this site, and derive that interest from the way each was constructed in something of a reconstructed history. There is no record of who constructed either cabin, but that in itself is unimportant since both cabins were constructed with neighbors helping neighbors. What distinguishes these cabins is their construction. The logs forming the frame of the older cabin are planked, that is, squared. The scoring at more or less regular intervals evident on each of the logs represent axe blows cutting into the side of a log crosswise, from which the axeman then chipped away the log longitudinally. It's a slow, tedious process, but the end result is that there is a flat surface between the assembled logs, called the chink, which provides a stable surface for chinking, that is, caulking. Filler to prevent cold drafts in winter. Chinking consists of rocks, sticks, woods, chips, clay, or sod. The corners of the cabins are secured with half dovetail notching. The notch, though somewhat easier to fashion than its parent type, still produces a firmly locking joint, which has the advantage of draining rainwater to the exterior, thereby retarding rotting. There are openings cut through the logs in each of the four walls of this cabin that either have or could have had a door, or a window. Originally, however, single-pan, that is, one-room log cabins, at the time this cabin was built, had but a door, and perhaps an opening cut for a fireplace. The cabin's function was specifically for protection against the weather and hostile natives. The second cabin is more crudely built. Most of the logs were left brown. Many still retain bark. The corners are joined with double saddle notch. In this construction, the ends of the logs extend beyond the corners, unlike the half dovetail, which has squared ends. Several of the logs have been partially hewn to even the wall surface. Both cabins have been floored with planks, which indicate that both were built to house humans, not barns for animals. Only later were they used for feed and perhaps hay storage. Deeds of record for this property suggest that the older cabin was built as early as 1855. The original affidavit, number 69, was issued to L.J. Francis, February 26, 1857, with the patent granted to Ezekiel Daly, assignee of Lethbridge J. Francis, August 16, 1869. By the time Henry Smythe wrote his historical sketch of Parker County in 1877, Lethbridge and Lethbridge Francis, presumably Lethbridge's brother, had moved on. With the loss of deeds of records in the courthouse fire of 1874, the title history of this property is vague at best. Abstracted title to this property show the names George Levy, L. I. Tuckett, William T. Ivy, H. B. Doublet, Franco Texas Land, and more. The abstracted title reads like a who's who in Parker County. However, George L. Dobbs purchased the land about the year 1888 from Schuyler Oldham, who may have purchased the land from Francis earlier. Over the course of the next several years, title to the land passed from one Dobbs to another. James Dobbs figures into this scenario, ending with Holly Roark Dobbs in 1901. The second cabin dates from about this time. Even then, the path of ownership is cloudy, with a trail of liens and bankruptcies. Nor does it become clear until it was purchased by Joseph C. and Clodagh May Woody sometime in the 1930s. The L.J. Francis property became part of the more than 4,000-acre Joseph C. Woody Ranch. Joseph died in 1950. Since then, the property has remained in the Woody family and is now in its fourth generation. In 1888, fire destroyed the original Dobbs home. They rebuilt, and later that house became the home of Loyal and Mamie Woody in 1934. It was here that they reared their three children, Robert, Melvin, Joanne, and James. In later years, that house was vandalized and had to be bulldozed. The present owner of these cabins is Cassie Cluess. The three existing sheds attached to the sides of the cabins are later additions: a garage for the family car, a shed for Loyal's tractor, and a small tack room. Running lengthwise to the Dobbs cabin is a long, narrow room used to store feed. When the original cabins were re-roofed in the 1990s, the original corrugated roofing was used to clad the sides of the cabin, thus protecting them from further deterioration.
It was covered when they discovered the chinking inside, and it was just rocks and sticks, and you fill it with rocks and sticks, and you'd think when you start flaking all wood off of a log like this, how many wood chips you've got. But you got lots of wood, and they're all wedge shaped, so you can just wedge them in, and you can fill in. You could chink this pretty easily.
And they weren't chinking it to be kept warm,
No.
like a house. So
And the other characteristic, this is according to Jordan's book on folk architecture in Texas, if you find that the logs have been planked like this, Well, there were no barns for animals, first of all. The idea of putting in any livestock in a barn is just unthought of. And if a barn was used for anything, it was used for hay or for feed. And that's pretty much true. That the livestock and the early Smythe, Henry Smythe did a history of Parker County in 1877, and he describes how before there was fencing or anything, the animals they were free to roam. They had different ways. They used salt blocks and different ways of managing their horses, their cattle, and their hogs, just by how they fed them and how they attracted them back to the home. Wow. But you can blame all those wild hogs in Parker County or throughout Texas. All those early people who came here just let their hogs go wild. Yeah. We know what hog wild means. It means destruction. No, destruction for sure. So pretty much that's what this cabin is, and the roof was redone in 1990. And Melbourne oversaw that, and when they took the old roof off, they used the old roof to decide the outside of the building here, which is part of the accident of preservation. It was just a matter of accident that the buildings were preserved. Apparently, Royal Woody, Melbourne's father, was a rich boy who never did anything. And the family story goes that Loyal would raise 200 feeder calves on this place, but the year his father died was the last year that they had the feeder calves on the place. So it tells you Daddy put the feeder calves here so Loyal would have the money to spend on whatever he wanted to do. But he didn't want very much, but he didn't want to work. and every time I've asked Melvin for more information about, well, what did your father do? Well, he didn't do anything. So anyway, we were able to date this, and the first man who that we have deed of title to was a man named Leftridge, L-E-F-T, it's wrong in the little book, Leftridge Francis, Leftridge J. Francis and he has a little reverend tacked on the front of his name. No one knows what church or anything because he and his brother Leftwich moved on by 1870, and that about that point the Dobbs family showed up on this property.
That cemetery over there, I've seen the stone that says Dobbs on it. Is that the man that started?
Then that was the Dobbs, and that's why they always call this the Dobbs-Engberg, the Dobbs-Woody-Engberg cabin, because the earliest record they thought it was the Dobbs, because of the Bethel Baptist Church, which was over here, and the Dobbs little two graves up here in the cemetery.
So there's two in that cemetery?
That's what I
remember there was a tall one and there was a little one, but I hadn't seen it, so.
It's there. So that's how the Dobbs, and then the Dobbs family, they were in and out of here. The father, the son, and all of a sudden in 1890, the 22-year-old Holy Dobbs got the cabin. How he got title to it when he was 22 years old is hard to tell, but it was just in the family. And so, and ultimately then Joseph Woody bought the property, bought the
there's several Dobbses that still live in Springtown. I was akin to this Dobbs.
Oh yeah, they are.
There's a bunch of other ones.
Oh yeah. Of course, Mac is still
Mac Dobbs.
Yeah. You Bob Bradford.
Yeah.
Well, Bob Bradford's daughter-in-law brought her out to show her that they're redoing a cabin out in Precinct 2, and I've kind of brought her, I wanted to see this in the Woody house in order to understand before she tore into her cabin too much. And the first thing she did is she walked in and looked at that board.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Well, there's a Yopon design and it's carved into that.
Do you have slip-ons with flowers?
Oh, yeah, the yolks.
Yeah. And as many times as we've been in this barn, Kimberly, Craig, and I, and none of them had noticed that.
Yeah.
So what did that mean back then?
I don't know.
Because I think it's like yolk of
That when Kimberly first dug into this building, it was right where this door is there were wood ashes, which suggests that here's where the chimney was, the original chimney. With the log cabin, which makes sense. In this room, you can see that this was the Dobbs section that was added, and you can see here that they used just the saddle notch, and but not only that, it's also interesting because they obviously cut some fresh logs for building this, but they also used some old logs that they got somewhere. So, and in the corner, you'll discover that all of these are saddle notch down here, but you get up here and there's the half dovetail notches.
That's interesting.
Because they were already notched for the dovetail.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And so they
intermix them.
That's the strange part of this. On that wall, there's a board and batten. That was the outside of the original cabin. That was before they put the metal on here. And if you look through the logs here, you can see that these are all 1x12s. And that's a small granary room there, and you'll see that that's also board and batten. So originally this log cabin was clad in board and batten. And that would have answered some of the chinking problems because they wouldn't have had to chink it as carefully with it already blocked off with the boards. But that also argues sometime later that was added, and the original part was probably chinked and with sticks and rocks and whatever, and then they used caliche or mud to fill in to seal it off.
I got a question.
Yes.
How do you explain that the bark has stayed on that so long?
It's never been exposed to any elements. And they're all in a number of places. Up on the Elder farm, their mule barn still has the bark on it.
So it's almost like it's
petrified. Yeah. Well, no, it's not. No, it's just rigid on there. It just stayed. I don't know.
That is so cool. That's a good question.
Normally bark don't stay too long on a log.
I know it doesn't, but all I can tell you is that if you there are other barns in this area that buildings that are called barns that will have the bark on them, and it's not on the elder. It's the what? The Isbell Ranch. They have an old barn in the back, an old mule barn, and on the Isbell Ranch, and the logs still have the bark on them. It would be interesting to have a biologist come in and look at the barks and determine what the trees actually were, because there could be a mix. There could be a mixture of oak and pecan and the.
Have you looked at that little barn that's back off up there in the pasture that's got metal on the outside of it?
Yeah, that's the old Pickard barn.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's some bark there too.
Yeah. How old do you estimate that is?
About 1890. The Pickards got their patent in about 1890, and that was apparently the outpost. Lewis Pickard had two plots, He had 160 acres, a little to the south of here, and then the one down here in the going out to Highway 51. And that apparently was in the back end of that 160 acres that he had there. And that may have been their outpost for their cattle or something, you know, for the men working the cattle.
I saw that a long time before I ever saw this.
Yeah. What I got curious on that because the corrugated iron is so deteriorated on that. Yeah. Well, I got curious enough to look, and I didn't realize that corrugated iron was available from 1830 on.
Sure enough.
Yeah, I mean it's been around for a long time, and this corrugated iron on this wall here, that's clad the outside of this wall, that was the original roof on this cabin. When Melvin had this re-roofed, they pulled that iron off and they put it on the outside.
Somebody shot holes in it.
This?
No, those are the old nail holes.
Is it the nail holes?
Yeah, yeah.
That hadn't been on there too terrible long.
1990.
That long ago?
Yeah, Melvin said he did it in 90. And you can see that it's newer here.
Probably. If that hadn't been done, it might not have been preserved as well as it is.
It's all by accident and neglect that it's preserved. Nothing intentional was ever.
Yeah, I think you're right.
No, and you tell Melvin that, and he'll just kind of chuckle, just put his head down and laugh. You get to the point where people will tell you, well, this is the cabin, but then you sit in on, you hear what they have to say, but they had never bothered to go back to the records. And when we got ready to do this tour, Kimberly came up with the abstract of title that Woody got from the Dobbs family. And so we were able to save a lot of time in the county records office just by going through the abstract of title.
My name's Dobbs.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, that was relatives.
Uh-huh. Well, and when you get to the title, the abstract, there were about 6 different Dobbs names on this, and how you figure which one had it or how he had it at any given time, it just defies.
Well, that's Kimberly's talked to me about that, you know, and I don't understand it neither.
Yeah.
Who I thought it belonged to turned out to be somebody else.
Well, there was one that I was reading last night, and one of the Dobbs family, there were 19 kids that they were raising. I mean, that they had, due to first marriages, 2 first marriages, and then their own progeny, and they ended up having 19 kids.
Yeah, that was my great-grandfather.
Oh, that was okay.
Great-grandfather, and you know, his first wife died, and he married a widow lady.
Yeah.
And had more children by the second wife than he did by the first.
And she had her children too.
She had 3 when we married. But my grandfather was out of the older group.
Uh-huh.
His first wife. My grandfather was.
They were well covered in a board and batten. And you look down on the floor, and all of a sudden you see that they were using the same covering on that floor. When they took the walls off this cabin, they just put their wood floors in. People don't realize that hen nest is up there, but you see this was Loyal's tractor shed, and you can see where the roof line was. We were sitting in my house. I had a birdhouse underneath the eaves on an addition in the back of my house, and I lived right in Weatherford. And one morning, Sunday morning, we were sitting at the breakfast table, and my wife looked out, and she said, "There's something wrong at the birdhouse. I can't figure it out." Well, I looked out, and it was a chicken snake coming out of the birdhouse, and it had eaten everything in there, and it couldn't get out.
swelled up.
It swelled up and couldn't get out the hole. But what? And I talked to Melvin about this. Yes, they used to have to worry about reaching into this hen's nest and grabbing a whole snake.
They were bad to get in their nest.
They just come right down off the roof and slither right into the, coil up right underneath the hens.
Hard a whole lot more work than that did.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And not only that, but you know, normally, you think of how much it goes into this. This little cabin here has 43 logs in it. Think of how much work it took just dragging those logs out of the timber.
All that was done by hand.
All was done by hand.
Yeah, there wasn't no power tools then.
The size of this header beam. Never even noticed that, how long that was.
Yeah.
It's a monster.
Does that go all the way around?
Yeah.
It looks like it.
It does. It's about 18 feet long.
You can see the marks on
Yeah.
it.
I didn't know how they squared those logs. You know, you stand on the side and you put your notches into it, and then with a broad axe you chop off the sides and you roll the log. Then you do the other sides one at a time.
Lots of work.
Lots of work. You didn't build it in a week or a month. And usually it was done by a number of people getting together and building.